Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat and I am your host, and I am so excited to welcome you to this week's episode where I interview my friend Zack Alexander, who is an incredible human being that I think all of you are going to enjoy listening to this week. And he is a spiritual leader. We talk about politics, we talk about this new world that is being birthed right in front of our eyes and how we are a part of it individually and in the collective. So I'm really excited for this conversation. We just got off we finished recording and then we got off like another 45-minute conversation because we were just catching up and chatting about things. And it's so wonderful to have really grounded support in the community. You know, I've only been in this spiritual space for 3 years and Zach's been in it for 6, and he's had so much success in such a short amount of time. And it's just really nice to have community and friendships where, you know, there's so much support and genuine support at that. Zack is a really grounded, down-to-earth person. You'll hear about his story and his journey from law school to now spirituality, and he is about to dip his toe into running for the US Senate, which you're not going to be disappointed by his journey. It's pretty incredible. But Zack is a trauma-informed spiritual and leadership mentor, and he's really focused on integrating the mental, emotional, physical, and he adds political selves, and he is charting a new course in this new paradigm with a bunch of other healers. He just launched the WayShowers program, the WayShowers collective rather. I used to be a part of his healers program where I've met so many other wonderful people in that community. And really at the end of the day, I think what Zack does really well is bring a really down-to-earth perspective on spirituality and build community around it. In fact, the people that I've met through his community have been some of the most human people going through these really spiritual experiences. And I think we're kind of leaning out of the age of over spiritualism. I think like things like manifestation are not resonating with people anymore. It's kind of too out there for the world that we live in these days. Or, you know, we talk about spiritual psychosis on the podcast today, which is a fascinating topic, especially for people who are awakening and brand new in their awakening. So I think you're really going to like this episode. The Heal with Kat podcast is an open space for anyone to come talk about what they believe in. Just because I have a guest on that talks about a political belief doesn't mean that I always agree with it. It doesn't mean that I sit on the same side of that field. It just means that there's a lot of different perspectives, schools of thought, and ways of thinking that I think are really important to stay open-minded to. I'm really of the belief that every single person that you meet, you can learn something from. And whether you agree with it or not, I think it's important to pay attention, be curious, and keep an open heart and an open mind. So keep that attitude if you can with Zack today, because we do get into a spicy political sphere of conversation that not everyone may agree with, and that's okay. So enjoy this episode. If you loved the episode and you loved it so much that you want to tell me what you thought about it, please do. All right, let's get into the episode with Zack, and yeah, enjoy, guys. It's going to be a good one. Zack, welcome to the Heal with Kat podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. I feel like we've been on such a journey together in different ways, working with each other in the last year or so. But now to have you on the podcast and talk about the things that you've been speaking to me about, speaking about on your Instagram rather, it's exciting to be able to dive into these things a little bit more than what we've had already.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here. A little nervous to dive in, but it feels right, and I'm glad I get to do it with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. You said that the last 3 podcasts you did were all with Lebanese people, so I feel like it's synchronistic.
Very, very much so. Like, what are the odds, right?
That's awesome. Well, I discovered you through your community. I want to say like a year and a half ago. You had your, what was it, on Telegram or your?
Yeah. No, it was 2 years ago. I remember you joining. It was some of my memories crazy like that. It was it was initially with the Healers program, and obviously, it was through Telegram and Podia and all that stuff.
Before we get into all of that, I just want to understand like who Zack is, your childhood, the things you've been through to get you to this place of who you are today, because your story is pretty incredible.
Yeah. My story is quite different, I guess, in a way. It's unique, and I guess we all have unique stories. But I'm a Jewish man, heavy history of childhood trauma. I felt like my family was kind of almost able to hide behind the look. We're a nice Jewish family facade a little bit, and a lot was swept under the surface. I definitely suffered with major dissociation growing up, addiction issues in a number of ways, and I really didn't see a future for myself. I really kind of saw myself spinning and spiraling. I think everyone around me didn't see anything positive in terms of the future projections. But, eventually I did get out of home. I started putting some pieces together. I started piecing together what it is to come up with a narcissist family, and I started doing my traveling. I started getting out in the world. I spent time living in South Africa and Kenya, and after I came back, I became bedridden ill, and I was actually bedridden ill for 4 years. I lost multiple organs. I lost my gallbladder. I developed type 1 diabetes. I had kidney stones. My gastrointestinal tract wasn't working. When I say I was bedridden, like I actually couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't work. And the medical field had basically discarded me. And so at that point, you're really left with no other choice but to learn how to heal yourself. And as someone who knew nothing about alternative wellness or alternative medicine, I was given no other option but to kind of delve into that path. Eventually, through some alternative and energetic testing, I was led to the right physicians. I worked with a Nigerian infectious disease doctor who diagnosed me correctly. I had the second most deadly infectious disease in the world.
What
Behind
was
only
it?
malaria. It was called schistosomiasis. Only malaria kills more people. And it's very present in Africa, but they just missed it. They missed it here. And the doctor I saw, he used to work for the CDC. He said there are things that they don't know what they're doing. Big pharma gets in the way a lot of times. And so, as crazy as it is, it's a very true story. I drank jugs of grounded up plants for 2 weeks, and it actually healed me. And I remember when he told me, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. I was really upset. And he was like, what do you have to lose? And it worked. After 2 weeks, I got up out of bed. I went to the gym for the first time and lifted a weight for the first time in years. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, so wait, I have to pause you right
I'm
there.
surprised
So
we haven't
you
this
were
ever came
not
up with 3-hour conversations before. Yeah. Yes. This is,
Yeah, okay, so you were not a spiritual person before this. It was,
no,
like, not even part of your, like, vocabulary is what I'm hearing, and then you
not at all.
had this, what I'm guessing was a spiritual experience? Like,
Nope. Nope.
no?
So here's the crazy thing is even when I was going to these alternative medical facilities and I was getting these different, like, IV treatments and stuff, right? So this nurse came up to me. She started talking to me about spirit guides, getting messages and downloads. And I just looked at her and I really respected her. I was like, look, this person's crazy. Like, what am I doing here? And so even after I healed from my illness, I had people come up to me and be like, do you believe in God now? Do you believe something's looking after you? And I was like, this is all coincidence. Like, I just want to get my life back. So no, that actually didn't provoke a spiritual awakening. I was very logic based. I would say I was agnostic. I wouldn't say I was a full blown atheist, but as someone who screwed up, who screwed around his whole life or was, constantly getting in trouble, constantly rebelling. My kind of revelation after the illness is let me try and buy into society. Let me try and do what everyone always told me to do. So I returned to school. I'd never been a good student, but suddenly became like the star student. I received scholarships to top law schools. I ended up going to one of the top law schools in the country on a near full scholarship. And it was around that time that a lot of memories of child abuse, repressed abuse came up. I was filled with a lot of anger and rage. It was very confusing, very disorienting. And I would say it was almost a year after the memories came up that the doors blew open spiritually. And I had started stepping into forgiveness. It was a very interesting experience, but then the synchronicities also started occurring. I felt a connection with something. I would get these little hits, be here right now, and I would step in somewhere and then everything would unfold like a play in terms of everything was in alignment. And it was a very disorienting experience because my perception of reality was shattering. My perception of how the world worked was shattering. I remember I was with a former partner at this time, and she was like, well, why is this a bad experience? Like, because I wasn't like interpreting it negatively. I was like, this means I'm not in control. Like, this means I'm
Mhm.
not in, like, I liked kind of the notion of there being a random chaos. Like, the fact that this is all organized chaos, that, I wasn't in control. Like, this is something is creating this on my behalf. Like the illness, this. And so I had this blowing open spiritually. I'm trying to figure out like how to ground this, what this means. I go to law school. That ends up being very messy as someone going through a massive awakening. I ended up cutting off my family around that time. I disclosed my abuse to an associate dean. They didn't handle it well. And so it really felt like the kind of the forces were pushing me out of the legal field, which was very confusing and upsetting to me as someone who thought they would be a really tremendous lawyer. I wanted to be a child advocacy lawyer. And long story short, like shortly after that, I got hired off the street at a local wellness center. I initially just started leading meditation groups around mindfulness. Like it was something that was helpful for me in my trauma, in my like healing journey. But people started coming in to me for trauma healing. I was referring them out to other therapists. They would come back in. They would say, we don't find these therapists helpful. And it kind of set me on a journey where I just started reading everything I could about trauma healing, applying them as conservatively and safely as I could. As someone who honestly wasn't credentialed, I do not believe should have been in the space I was in. But these people were having nowhere to go, and they were getting really good results. And I got in this career and it just kind of kept expanding and growing. I eventually jumped online. I was a men's coach for a couple of years. I helped men with their own mental health and their awakening journeys, right? Because there's a lot of complexities going on when men are healing or working through trauma. Eventually mentored and trained psychologists, therapists, coaches in the integration of like the energetic, the physical, the psychological. And then, yeah, now as a Jewish man over the last year, there's definitely been a lot more of a political tone to what I've been doing. And I've just been trusting in something. This process has been messy. I don't know if I would have consciously drawn it up this way, but I'm grateful to be here. And yeah, I'm here.
I really wanted to ask you what it was like being a male going through this spiritual awakening, when I feel like there's this stigma in the spiritual space around it's feminine and it's like a woman thing, like intuition, a woman's intuition. I mean, you're one of the most intuitive people I've ever met, and you own it in such a grounded way. And I think that's what's kind of contributed to your social success, about how you kind of make fun of what is it, like the nightingale with the blue wig or something that. I mean, it's just like, what has that process been like for you? Did you battle your own ego? What was it like being in community with other men going through this?
It was really difficult. I got to say that was probably the most difficult aspect of this. I did not have an example or template of what this looked like for a long time as a male. I have to be fully transparent. I did the first couple years of this awakening process and being in quote unquote the new age sphere, because that's where you land into when you have an awakening and you don't know what you're doing. I felt energetically castrated. I felt like displays of raw masculinity was deeply discouraged. And yeah, I know like men have been cut off from their emotional world, so it's important for us to be in our emotions. But like kind of the messaging I was getting was to just kind of always break down into a little child, which is important to degrees, but not the level that was encouraged in me. And I started feeling very numb and very disconnected from myself. And a few years into the awakening, I had to ask myself, like, why as a male did this seem to be going backwards now? And I don't think the spiritual community or the spheres, I think there's so much trauma with the masculine that it did not know how to space appropriately for healthy forms of masculinity to come out, or for a man to work through some ugly things, right, that needed to happen. And that's really where the return to the rawness and the authenticity came from. As someone who grew up outside Philadelphia, I spent my entire young adult years in Queens, New York. There's always been like a pretty high bullshit radar with me, and I really, that started really activating waking up, and I was like, you know what, I'm in the spiritual sphere. It feels like I'm going through a lot of the trauma I experienced in my family unit with the gaslighting, the invalidation. And I was like, I'm watching a lot of people also feel very disconnected from themselves, also feel like they're stepping into these false personas. And spiritual awakening isn't meant to cut us off from ourselves. It's meant to add layers, complexities, colors, tones to who we are. And so there was a really big journey of me finding that like raw, authentic self, not downplaying it, but also like working through my shadows, not allowing it to run the show, so to speak. I've been guilty of that.
Same.
And just being a man who was comfortable in his spirituality. I did eventually work with men's coaches. One in particular, his name is Eric Alman, who was a very grounded man in his gifts and his wisdom with this stuff. And that really did help move this along in a healthier way for me.
I want you to talk a little bit about spiritual psychosis, because there were moments in my awakening where I definitely felt like I had moments where I had left my body so freaking hard that I was kind of just like not existing in my body, not feeling very grounded in the things I was moving through. And I know you talk a lot about spiritual psychosis. Can you explain to the community what that is, how it can show up, how to work through it?
Yeah, well, I mean, so when we go through a spiritual awakening, we're experiencing like the non-physical elements of our reality, right? We can experience these like very heightened states of consciousness where we feel the deep interconnectedness of everything. we feel, oh, we're all one. Like that's an experience for a lot of people, this oneness experience. What ends up happening is that a lot of us stay up there. Okay. And this is why there's this important concept of integration, which I didn't understand. It wasn't being taught in these spaces as well when I came. You can't bypass human physiology. You can't bypass the brain, the mind. Like these parts of you have to adapt, take in, and be worked with. And so what ends up happening is we end up bypassing our physical experience. We end up bypassing our emotional experience. We end up like brute forcing our way to a certain mental narrative, but it's through all these like gimmicks and tricks, and it's not really grounded in anything. We're actually fracturing from real true parts of ourselves, right?
Mm.
So as a spiritual psychosis is typically you access different states of awareness. You might access different states of consciousness through breath work, plant medicine, sometimes naturally. It was a very natural experience for me. But then you sometimes you're using it as a means to ignore and neglect your real human physiological experience. And so your emotions and feelings aren't really matching up. Like your thoughts can be chaotic. You can feel very numb. I watch like it's like the light goes off behind people's eyes. Like they're not able to relate to their world. I know for me, like it's like my physical reality like took a complete back seat. Like I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't doing the self-care things that you're supposed to do to be a healthy person. It was like it was caught between two worlds and nothing was coming home in a sense.
It's so important. I feel like that's one of the things that I've learned from you that I didn't realize I was going through back when I started having my awakening. But it's like you just kind of, for me, it was like walking around and seeing like everything from like a different perspective, but it wasn't in relation to other people. It was almost like I was looking for the spiritual meaning for everything without actually looking at the connection of just these are people, yes, we're souls in a human body, but they're people doing their best. And it's like we have to meet people in that humanness. And I think sometimes, especially in the past, my nervous system will get really triggered by certain dynamics or certain relationships or certain behaviors or people. And I'll start immediately going up here and thinking, well, what's the point of this? And what do I need to understand about this? And what's their sole purpose? And is this a past life thing? And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter. They're showing you a behavior. You got to take it for what it is.
Well, and you bring up great points because it's like you just pull yourself up to a mental construct and try and find a mental construct to apply rather than being in your raw, authentic experience and just working with that correctly.
Yeah.
What led me into heavy states of spiritual psychosis? I mean, I was pulling myself there. Don't get me wrong, but the practitioners I was encountering were actually encouraging it, or sometimes like cutting me off when I was trying to ground back in. And there's one in particular who was definitely doing it. I remember I was having like an argument, or was having a difficult time handling conflict with a former partner, right? And a lot of it was on me. And I would go and I would be on the phone and be like, hey, so with my practitioner, like, what do I do? And the practitioner would be like, well, what past life is that from? And I'm like, well, what does that fucking matter? Sorry, excuse my language. But anytime there was a raw, authentic experience, I was like encouraged to kind of connect or be like, this is an alternate timeline. And there's space for those concepts, but it's very nuanced. You have to be really like discerning when to use that with a client or a person or apply it within yourself. And it was like, if there's an experience that makes me uncomfortable or I don't know how to work with this, go look for a spiritual construct, live in there, and then also inflate your sense of self because you're more woke for doing this. And so it's a really nasty game that gets played, and I see a lot in the spiritual spheres do it.
Well, one of my questions was that ever since I've gotten to know you, one of your biggest missions has been to be the spiritual teacher for other leaders. And I'm guessing that's where this kind of like motivation to be that comes from, maybe the experiences that you've had.
Well, I don't know if I would ever actually want to be the spiritual teacher for other leaders, in all honesty. I've been in a teaching mentorship role. It's taking on a spiritual tone, and it's been necessary. But I had to be overall honest. I never necessarily felt like I just wanted to kind of be in the background. And it's just being real. It's like fine, I'll do it myself. Like what if you know that means? And so yeah, I've always wanted to be a guiding force for people and help give them the tools and resources around how to interact with their world. But I wanted to be a leader who understood the spiritual and the metaphysical, but I wanted to kind of just be on the ground myself and do it, and was waiting for that window, potentially if it were to open up.
What, in your experience, like everything that you've been through, I'm sure with law school, you probably learned key qualities of leadership, and then in the spiritual space that you've been in and how you've grown as a person, like what are the key qualities that you believe set transformational leaders from more traditional ones?
I mean, I think really effective leaders can push the boundaries of what the collective feels like is possible. Okay. And to really see a new vision, to see a new paradigm, right? And envision it, and then to ground and hold a space where that can occur and people feel safe to look in that direction and say, why not? And then to collectively work there together, that a leader holds space for us to get there together. It's, you're not enforcing your will upon something, per se. You're not controlling or like posing. You're grounding in a vision, and you're giving almost a template like this, we can do this, and then people rally around and get there together. And it is an evolution. My own personal journey, I've studied Lincoln and Nelson Mandela heavily. You know, Nelson Mandela's story was one that I read right before my illness. I was living in South Africa, so I went to Robben Island. I read his autobiography in less than a week, and he was a man that spent 30 to 40 years in prison and as a political prisoner. And when he was released, everyone thought he was gonna like almost lead a genocide against the people who had imprisoned him. And this was a man who found forgiveness, and brought the country together through unity and through compassion. And is a really beautiful story to see that and say that this can happen. Lincoln was someone who, in his own way, was so similar to Mandela and so opposite, because he had been through immense hardship, struggled with mental illness, struggled with depression his entire life, lost tons of elections, but he was really grounded in this principle that every man is created equal. And so slavery could not be reconciled with that for him. And so this is a man, when he took office, um, he was getting pushed from all ends, like compromise, and compromise with the South, right? And he was, I can't reconcile this. And he could hold the vision of like this, and he held it, and eventually just it grew until there was emancipation and slavery fully dissolved. Like, he held that despite brothers killing each other, because he was like, this does not reconcile. These values and principles don't reconcile. So I really believe it's the capacity to hold a vision of something that feels new and scary, but is necessary. I feel it's the ability to be very grounded in your own principles, your own values, your own beliefs, to really not be swayed from that and to guide from that space. But like I said, my leadership style is also one of like, I am very hands off. Like I speak what's my truth. I hold that space, but it's not my job to impose anything on you. Like, this has to be a conscious decision upon everyone.
So what's coming up to ask you in hearing all of that is kind of what I'm noticing, that what you have in common with Abraham Lincoln and Nelson Mandela, which is that all three of you are men who have a vision for something way before its time. And then the challenge of bringing that belief system and through leadership into a collective that is way behind in that mentality. What do you hold on to in your vision? Because there's a bigger question we're getting to that I know we really want to talk about today, about you possibly being a leader in the government space at some point. But like, what do you hold on to when you can see this vision, when the collective is not all there with you?
So the vision, I don't think war is necessary at all. And that's a pretty controversial take, I think, at this point, right? And that's holding space for, groups who've been oppressed. Like, there should be an urge for violence. There should be an urge to fight back, right? And so this is also like, this is a deep, like, reworking of everything, that those who've been oppressing shouldn't fight back at all. Right. What do I hold on to this vision? Like you said, as a Jewish man, like, I'm very involved in what's going on within Palestine right now. What's the vision, or what do I hold on to? It's belief and faith. Like, I shouldn't, my life journey is one where there's no way in hell I should be where I am right now. I've had to surrender and put faith in something that I haven't understood over and over again. And despite the odds being stacked up against me, I found my way here. And so I'm placing my faith and surrendering in that as well. But now unfortunately it's happening on a collective level, which is, it's messier. It's a lot more tricky, but there's something there, and I think we're ready to work out of. Humans, I believe, people are deeply too smart, too wise, and they've become disconnected from a self and disconnected from a humanity that needs to return, because we're almost too smart to be fighting each other the way we are, because we will annihilate the world. And not being alarmist, but like we've come close already before with over the last century. So this is something that I think we need to really explore.
I think it's really important to hear you talk about faith and a vision and a collective coming together for people to really remember that we're not here to do this alone. And I feel like now, where our earth and where our world is now, we have to lean into community like even more than we ever have. We have like a very hyper independent society. And I think that even with like AI, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love using ChatGPT for things. Like, it's so great. I mean, I know on your stories too, like the other day when it was so awesome. Guys, if you're not even sure what I'm talking about, go follow Zack on Instagram immediately. I'm going to put his link in the show notes. I mean, he just posts the greatest stories. But I mean, yeah, I feel like our society is so used to being hyper independent. I just think it's the collection of so much trauma that everybody is just like carrying around. To have somebody who wants to be a leader in our world hold that vision for staying together, I think is really important. It's great.
Yeah, no, I believe it.
Recently on your Instagram stories, you announced somewhat informally that you'll be running for the US Senate soon. And this is like really what I would love to sink our teeth into in the conversation. You've talked a lot about how you dabbled in law school and you've gone through the spiritual experience. And you said that you really are here to kind of be boots on the ground and like do something that's way more grounded. Tell us a little bit about that desire, what's driving it, and even if you feel called to, your plan on how to get there and what you want to do.
Yeah. So it's funny. Politics was something that was always something I was looking at when I was younger. But I think when I went into law school and I saw some of the fellow students, like I had some really amazing people in my class, but I saw some of the fellow students who were more so like political oriented. I didn't really like the attitudes or the approaches there. I'm like, that sphere is kind of pulling a certain personality that I don't think I could be. And so this isn't for me. And then, when I left law school to go initially be a Reiki healer, I'm like, okay, that's fully off the table. Like there goes any political career of mine. And I will say I thought, the role I play in the world would just be different, and I accepted that. And I thought, and I didn't think I had these notions of like, well, what even gets done in the political realm? These people kind of take on these positions. They're kind of cycling a machine. Nothing really shifts or changes. So why even put my energy there? It doesn't make sense.
I think a lot of people feel that way. Why would I get involved? I'm
Yeah,
so
no,
small.
absolutely. I think definitely this past election cycle, seeing RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson come in and their perspectives and the ways, and they're very different policy-wise politically, but it's a little bit of the energy they were coming in with, and people were picking up on it. I'm like, there's a window here. And in my own life, a couple years ago, I was having these experiences, whether through, some medicine work where that started showing up as a potential, and I was like shutting it down. And it just left a window open. And so I said, maybe in, a decade down the line, like we'll see, who the heck knows, right? I really feel as someone, who I have my Palestinian colleagues, I have my Jewish colleagues, like I'm communicating with them daily. And as that situation has continued to erupt, right, I think the murder and death of children, especially with military weaponry, especially in a holy land, there's something really, really deep here that I don't think we're able to fully take in, that's happening. And if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, they're not keen on stopping it. Like there's a machine at play here, and neither party is keen. And I'm not going political as a single issue person, but this pulled me. And so over the last few months, I've had to really sit with and have some, difficult conversations myself, with those around me, around the path that I felt was my future definitely seems to be shifting. And yeah, I will be running for the US Senate. The plan right now is 2028. So it's 4 years away. It's not something immediate, but for someone like me who's very much an outsider, I need to be conscious of this choice now if I'm going to potentially win. I'm not going to say who or what yet, but I would try to, someone is from the East Coast, I'm going to likely try to win a seat, and one of the seats that is more difficult. And so there's a level of support that I'm going to need to raise. There's a level of groundedness and coherency that I need to have within myself, because I'm not going to do this to be swept up by a political machine and become another cog. I'm very invested in charting my own course and letting that flow in my direction, so to speak. And my political beliefs are honestly very simple. It's nothing revolutionary, but there's definitely things that have gone off the rails in America that we have to tend to. Our politicians on it right now. And so, yeah, there's definitely the deeper call of like, I feel that someone like me, there's a window now where someone like me will be taken seriously in that capacity. And I'm going to take that window, so to speak. And I'm advocating that others take their own windows into these spaces too.
What are these pressing issues that have gone, off the rails in the U.S. and the government and the way that our country runs that you're feeling really activated by, aside from the war?
Wealth inequality is absolutely insane. And federal minimum wage has not risen in God knows how many years. I should know this, whatever, but it's been quite a while. And so the middle class has completely disappeared. We are the most overeducated and underemployed generation there is. We were all fed a dream, millennials, Gen Z, we're all fed a dream of do your work, go to school, the job and everything will be there. It's almost impossible for us to become homeowners. We are all struggling. Basically, I am someone who, as a type 1 diabetic going to a top law school, I could not afford my own diabetes medication sometimes. And there were not systems in place to catch me. That's insanity.
Wow.
And my story is not unique in that. And so there's fundamental safety nets that are not working appropriately. I also believe that our ability to exert influence as normal citizens upon our institutions are not there the way they need to be. America was founded upon this principle of a government for the people, by the people. That is completely not true anymore. It is a government for corporate interests, and it is run by corporate interests. And corporations are now considered people. And then there's a political polarization that they're pulling us into. Like, I'm sure you see on my Instagram, I did a whole thing where I said, hey, everyone, like, who are you going to vote for? And it was very split. There was a lot of Trump supporters. There was a lot of Harris supporters. There was a lot of I'm not voting, fuck them supporters, right? Which is great. And then I put up the actual issues, right? And almost everyone was in agreement on the actual policy issues themselves. And I was like, do you see what's happening here? Like, you all are fighting each other, but when on the main policy issues, almost everyone is in agreement on this. So what's actually going on here that we're being pulled apart like this to fight after one another? When we're actually given the layout, we're all searching for the same things. We actually don't want to be taxed like crazy. We want to know where our tax dollars are going to, but also like, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much overseas into wars that really have no effect on American lives. Pull some of that money back home and invest in the right resources and safety nets, so we're not all in survival mode, can't even reach up for the things that are necessary for us to live like a self-actualized life.
I have full body chills as you're talking. What I've noticed on social media and in my community is that I don't think anyone likes Trump or Harris. It's just that they hate Trump, so they're going to vote for Harris, or they hate Harris, so they're going to vote for Trump. And there's not a lot of clarity. And I think that's why I was such a fan of RFK, because finally someone could give me a clear answer as to certain issues that were happening. What were your thoughts when RFK joined the Trump team? Did you think it was a great thing, a bad thing? What kind of impact do you think that's going to have? Because I know so many RFK supporters who are now leaning towards voting for Trump because they care about this idea of make America healthy again.
I respect Kennedy a lot, and I think from the beginning I was like, it's not going to be through him. Like, if you're wanting this like political like change, this revolution to occur or whatever, right? This expansion of consciousness to occur within our political system, it will not be through him. And that was a very gut intuitive thing. And so when he went and just became another cog in the Trump machine, I wasn't remotely surprised. Trump, if anyone close, I'm sorry, I'm going to speak on this, to Trump, has always kind of said that he's let them down. He gets what he wants out of you, and then he kind of discards you. And so while Kennedy's war against big pharma and protecting the environment are absolutely admirable and in the right direction, I think he's completely miscalculating that he thinks that's going to be carried out through Trump. I don't think he should have supported or endorsed either candidate. I think he should have continued to stay congruent in himself and to continue to build support for his own policies and what he wanted to do. And this is what happens. I do not think he was strong enough as a candidate, as a person, to create his own paradigm and to be moved through. He just became swept up in someone else's, and he became swept up in the truth machine.
I completely agree. There were some things that RFK spoke about that I went to go see him in person when he came to Denver, and there were certain things he talked about. I was crying. And then there were some things he was talking about. I was like, you lost me. Like, I don't know that I want you to be my president, but I fucking love what you're doing. You know, you can see very clearly that Trump is a full-blown narcissist. I mean, it's that I'm not surprised that people around Trump feel that he gets what he wants and then he dumps you, right? But I think, like you said, this polarization, it's so hard to really want to support either side when it's all over the place, and yet everyone fundamentally wants the same things. How do you see yourself coming into the U.S. Senate and creating change when you, like Abraham Lincoln and Nelson Mandela, are so far ahead in your vision in a collective of people in the U.S. Senate that majority are baby boomers, or what is the one under baby boomers? Is it
X, I think.
X? Where, they've got some more traditional beliefs. I just saw this thing on Instagram that baby boomers are the most wealthy generation of our time. Like, there's such a disconnect.
I'm going to say something really daring here, right? I can't believe I'm going to say it. Okay. America was founded upon revolution. Okay. You know, you had this huge British Empire that was overseeing the colonies. And there was basically a group of men who were like, don't fucking tax me for tea. Right. And we're like, and you know what? This whole monarchy, this whole king thing. No, we're going to do it ourselves. And we're gonna elect the president. He's gonna be there for 2 terms, and that's it, because we don't want this monarchy, this kingship system anymore. We want the capacity and ability to govern ourselves. And they won that. They won that sovereignty. They won that right. They won the ability to have that individual sovereignty, the right to property, all those things. It's a really beautiful, it's as beautiful, profound of a story as there is. And why not again? And I mean that from the place of this isn't about war anymore or whatever. This is about education. This is about information. This is about people coming back home to themselves and saying, you know what, all these mechanisms that are telling me that I have no influence, that I have no power, that I can't change the system, right? If we collectively say as the younger generations, you know what, no more. I'm already seeing these attitudes play out in corporate America. I'm seeing a lot of the younger generation already start to tilt the way that those spheres operate, because they're like, we don't want to work under these conditions. They are not healthy for us. I think the way that you've seen the younger generations react to Palestine, I've got to be honest, whatever, are positive. Okay. And so I really believe that there's the capacity and ability for us to come together. Like, there's never going to be a political leader that comes in and says, I'm going to save us. It's going to happen through me. That's tyranny. That's fascism. Okay. But when we come in and we do it together, there's something really powerful in that, and I can feel that now. So I think it's the younger generation's responsibility, and I see the boomers also, certain members of the older generations also being on board, saying we see these things playing out. We know this isn't correct. So to unite under common ideals, principles, and values, and to say, you know what, 10 people at the top aren't going to run us anymore, and we're going to work together and figure out how to make that so. And we know that this isn't an overnight journey. Right.
It's interesting because you may have heard recently, like, these articles coming out about how people want to get rid of the Constitution, and yet it's confusing to me. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I'm like, what?
What? I didn't know. And so, there's. Do you remember who's saying that, by the way, right now? Do you know? You remember?
It was like a hot topic. I think like either the Washington Post or the New York Times or some big media news outlet came out with like this idea that we should get rid of the Constitution. And I think that there were a lot of people who identify with the Democratic Party who were kind of in support of that.
Yeah, no, you will never get me in remote support of that. I think that's idiotic and blasphemous. There's real beauty in the principles and values held in that document and what it represents. Obviously, like, times shift and change, and the way that is integrated into modern time needs to have space held for it. But, I think that is the fundamentally, like, most important thing to American democracy. And it's completely, I'm gonna be honest, it's completely idiotic to even like think that somehow getting rid of the U.S. Constitution is going to improve things right now.
Well, it's interesting because I think with the state of where the country is at, you know, and I've been thinking about this myself. This country was founded on these beliefs 200 and something, almost 300 years ago. How do those still hold true today in a society that is completely different from, you know, far, like we've gone away from the world that we've kind of lived in the 1700s. Like, how do you bring that into our world today? Are there certain things that we've outgrown? Should there certain things mold and evolve and change? What are those? Like, those are kind of the conversations I find myself having.
I mean, listen, like I'm actually, I lean left. You know, when I run for Senate, we're going to have to figure out all the mechanics of it. But, you know, it'll be through the Democratic Party as much as I love DNC and reform. And I'm a believer in the Second Amendment. But like, we also have to just for like even just historical context, like, you know, over 250 years ago, like it was about like, hey, if the government's tyrannical, the citizens can raise up arms and can overthrow the government. It was a checks and balances, which is a beautiful thing. That's just not possible anymore. And so sometimes I see people out in their, you know, in their ranches and they're like, yeah, like let's get, and it's like that, what a beautiful notion to still hold on to. It's just going to have to come to a different it's not going to be this violent revolution or whatever. They'll just drone you. Sorry. And this isn't about overthrowing or collapsing a system. This is really about leading an integration. This is about setting course on a new paradigm, shifting things that needs to be shifted, giving rights back to the people the way it needs to be given back to. You know, I am definitely a lot more of an isolationist than the mainstream political machine is right now. And so it's just kind of about returning to those values. I believe there is beauty in that. There's a lot of different cultures in America, and so there is beauty in state rights. I think we have very bloated bureaucratic systems that actually do need to be curtailed. I think a lot of our tax dollars go into feeding some pretty like parasitic bureaucracies that don't need to be, and I think we need to collectively like have real, transparent, and honest conversations about what needs to be quelled down. And so people really have the capacity to govern themselves, and there's not this bloated thing and this bloated military industrial complex that are just running us down.
'Hey guys, it's Kat popping in during the episode today to tell you about my free cycle breaker quiz. Do you ever feel stuck in the same family patterns or even feel like the black sheep of your family, and not in a good way? I felt like that my entire life. What if I told you that you could transform that role into something way more powerful, more meaningful, and more magical? With my cycle breaker quiz, I created this to help you understand the childhood coping tools that you are still replaying in your adult life. They're still showing up. And by understanding how you show up with your family in the role that you play, this can be the portal into understanding the patterns of your entire lineage just by looking at you. Whether you're the parentified child, the comedian, the rebel, the hyper-independent, or like me, the caregiver, this quiz will give you the insights that you need to reframe any resentment about how your childhood has shaped you. Once you take the quiz, you'll get a short and personalized podcast episode in your email inbox that dives into your archetype, helping you see the strengths that you've gained from growing up in this complex family. I'll even share with you the potential challenges that you may be facing as this archetype. And I'll even share with you a spirit animal to work with along the way, because who doesn't love a good spirit animal? The shift from black sheep to cycle breaker is a powerful one, and I want to support you along the way. Ready to embrace your role? All you have to do is go to katdao.com/cycle breaker to take the quiz. Again, that's katdao.com/cycle breaker to take the quiz. Your transformation from black sheep to cycle breaker starts right now. 1,000%. As a man, I'm so curious. What are your thoughts on this idea that patriarchy has fed where our country is at right now in terms of capitalism and materialism and all that?
There's truth to it, absolutely. And it's so important because it's like we've stomped out healthy forms of feminism. Even when women want to excel and succeed in corporate America, it's under very masculine oriented paradigms that I got to be honest, like just aren't healthy for the majority of women. The way that we acknowledge women's health, the way that we give maternity leave, like all these things, like these environments are not suited for women. And there's real genius in the way that women operate that the masculine doesn't always hold, that men can't always hold. And rather than shelve it or push it aside or only extract it when it benefits men, right? We need to hold space for all that to come up. There has been this kind of narrative within systems for forever where it's all masculine, it's all action, it's all do, and women give life and support us the way we need to support it and then get out. Right. And the genius and the gifts of the feminine have, I think, are really being pushed out. And so I don't think we're supposed to flip, not all to like a pure matriarchy, but there is an integration of, yes, like the fundamentally toxic aspects of just a highly patriarchal attitude need to be shelved, but we still need to hold space for the healthy masculine and all its potency that happens in leadership. But let it happen alongside women and the matriarchy, and understand what it's like when those two are basically fused together.
Yeah. It's so beautifully said. I really hope that our society can get to a place, and I think with our generation, it's getting there, where we can make room for that. I think duality is a really important thing, and I love the idea of yes and I think we're what I feel, be curious to hear what you think, but I feel like our country is just going through like the ultimate tower and death moment, and we just kind of have to like let it happen in a lot of ways. And sometimes things have to fall apart in order to like see where we get to rebuild. And maybe, like, God, I think about myself in the most like death moments of my life. I've finally had the openness consciously to be like, maybe there's another way, and maybe we need to go through that as a society as well.
I think we definitely are. And people are shocked like how optimistic I am about where I believe things will end up. Like I'm actually very optimistic despite everything.
Well,
I
mass
don't believe
media infuses fear in us. Like there's so
yeah.
much fear. I think it's great that you're
Well, yeah,
optimistic.
it's definitely not a false sense of optimism, but as someone who's been through a dark night of the soul over and over again, you don't get to where I've been without going through a death of self quite a bit. I'm just watching Americans go through it collectively. And I even put out a post recently where I was like, Americans are going through an ego death. They're going through a dark night of the soul. And that's okay. And during a dark night of soul, like we have to realize that our own individual healing process is no different than the healing process of a nation. There's a collective consciousness within America as well. And so when we're in the deepest depths of a dark night of soul, the shadows have to come up to be seen.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have someone like Trump, you have someone like Harris, you have Biden, who was like completely like mentally like mental faculties have just gone offline completely. And you have this really faulty leadership. The political assassination attempts are coming, and it's the most dreary, the most hidden elements that have been in the psychology of America have got to be seen. They have to be thrown in our face. They have to be explored. But I think us as citizens are doing it correctly. The politicians necessarily aren't. Well, and they kind of are, because they're showing themselves. I'll give Trump credit. He's never been fake. To me, I he's like, it's corrupt. I've been benefiting from the corruption. Here it all is, right? And some people take that in the reverse of like, oh, he's showing the shadow. He's taking off the mask, but he's still very much a part of that as well. But we're seeing it for what it is, and it's an opportunity for us to reconcile it, to see what's being hidden underneath the surface, to work with it. And there's a new light coming. And so the more willing and able that we are to be open to the shadow, to be open to the corruption, to be open to what's flashing to us, and to still hold on to the dream and to surrender into something new, I think there's a real beautiful, almost like American enlightenment coming. I think it's a couple decades away, but I think we're on our way there.
What piece of advice would you give someone who is feeling very swept up by the vibration or the energy that the US is in right now, and kind of feeling like they can't ground into their own beliefs or their own, if right now I honestly just feel like it's everyone for themselves. And like you said, who are you voting for? Well, everyone agrees on the same issues. Like what advice would you give to someone who's feeling like, I don't even know where to go with all of this?
Search out community. We've been highly isolationist for a while, and sometimes those attitudes go into directions that generally aren't healthy. and you shared in the beginning, when I've opened or launched community spaces, or myself have been just a member of one, the prevailing thing I've always come away with, or others come away with, is, oh my God, there's so many other people who see things the way I do, or who are holding this belief. And it's like, yeah, if you go on social media, the way the algorithms are, that's not what's going to be shown to you. But if you can be conscientious and directive about finding those communities, you're not alone in this, and it's important to not feel like you are.
Yeah. Community, community, community. We have to move away from this like hyper individualistic society that we live in, which corporate America loves. I feel like.
Oh, do they ever? Yeah.
I feel like I've been more vocal lately about like big food, big pharma, because I've been fucked by them. And I feel like now I'm just trying to take my health back into my own hands. So that's like the one issue like I'm actually like really inspired by in this election. There's obviously others too, but I feel like for the first time, there's people who are saying something's wrong on a mass scale. They're saying we need to fix it. And then people are actually doing something about it. Now, the fact that they've joined certain political parties, it makes it tough. It makes things really tough. But at the same time, I think that, everyone needs to kind of find the community of people, of the things that they really care about, and lean into that for, like you said, for safety.
Yeah. And I think, the things that have come up, they're, like I said, like an RFK Jr. and the platform, it's a domino that needed to fall in the correct direction. Right. And so I respect him immensely. And I think it's a domino for us to really hold a light to big pharma. I think the way our mental health system operates and the faulty foundations of those are already collapsing. And it's not, like I said, this isn't a violent revolution. Like therapists are figuring it out. Like this is ridiculous. Like, I'm taking notes the entire hour of the session. These people aren't getting anywhere. We're just talking about the problems. There's a somatic element. We're not getting to the root, and they're creating their own paradigms and creating their own system. So I'm watching it already occur, and it's really beautiful. And we just need to continue.
Feels like the U.S. is going through its own psychosis of some kind, honestly.
For sure, because like Americans, out of anyone, we've been living in alternate realities, I think, more than anything else. Like, we're imbued, like, our education system is nothing but memorizing facts. We're not imbued with really anything or allowed like this discovery of self to occur. We're very disconnected from a real congruent sense of community. We've been disillusioned with all the narratives being given to us of just do this and it'll all be like this. And we're coming out and we're like, we don't know what to do now. And so when there's when there's too much new information, or like a dissolving of mental structures too quickly, it does lead into states of psychosis. And Americans are really getting hit with that. And it's not through their own fault, really, per se.
We were born into it. It's a system, I feel like.
We were 110% born into it. And this hyper commercialization, this hyper commodification of the self, it's led to just like this fracturing, and which leads to the psychosis states. And this is why, like, many of us who've been on this awakening journey, like we went through it a little bit earlier to hold space for, I feel like, what massive amounts of Americans are now going through.
What I think of when you talk about that is my dad was born in Lebanon. His home was bombed when he was 8 years old. He's paralyzed on one side of his face. My uncle was in a coma for 48 hours at 12 years old. My whole family was affected by the war in Lebanon. And then they left and they were immigrants. They went to France. They had to survive in France. They came to the US and they were raised in a more communal environment where family is everything and you're raised like blood is everything. I just spent a month in Italy and you live abroad, so you'll probably resonate with this in some way too. Culturally, there are some things that the US did not adopt that other countries have that are tribal parts of like lifestyle and community that I think that the US has prided itself on. I'm my own person. I climbed my way to the top. I did this. And I think that that's great in theory until it becomes a coping mechanism and then you lose sight. And so it's interesting, like, kids in America, kids at 18, they get kicked out of the house. Like, that doesn't happen in other countries. They usually live with their families for a very long time.
Yeah, I feel like us as Americans, we have to find what our ideals, our principles, our values again are, right? Have real conversations and come together around those. And then really start asking, like, what are the communities that we want to create, rather than a system just chucking it out to us, right? And we're just ending up behind fences in suburbs. And I feel like we're on a road there, but this is the psychosis. Like, Americans have been so detached from self that there has to be this reconnection to self, reconnection to other, find safety in the other. We don't find safety and trust in one another, right? Whereas in other communities and other nations, they do. And that's our political machine, right? That's social media, like diffusing and polarizing, so we feel isolated. When we can start coming together and recognizing there's so much similarities there with all of us, right? And we can respect each other for our differences, we get to create the communities that we need for ourselves. And that's the revolution, right? Like when we talk about revolution, it can be like that, that's it. It's not that big of a deal. We make it so, right?
I love how you are reframing the word revolution. It's cool. It's a new age version of it, I feel like.
Yeah, don't use the term new age with me after all the shit I've been through with there. But yeah, no, I would say it's a
The
modernized,
modern. Yeah, it's modern.
modern 21st century version of it, right? Yeah.
So I have one more question related to the political sphere, and this is purely just out of curiosity. I know you mentioned Abraham Lincoln, but is there a president that we've had, or even multiple presidents that we've had in the history of our country that you feel you're inspired by, did it right, were on a positive trajectory, and then, something happened? Like, who are you really looking to in the past to kind of inspire your journey?
FDR is a huge one. I mean, what he did, taking over after the Great Depression and really giving us setting a new vision and course for America in a time of probably the greatest dark night of soul that existed. The last one would be, I mean, these are simple names, but they're here for a reason, like John F. Kennedy. I mean, I think he exemplified leadership, and to be young and to be able to step in that role and to be able to lead us through some difficult crises. But those are the two that absolutely pop out to me. I will say that recent presidents, no. Within my lifetime and the ones that preceded me, I'm not a fan of Bill Clinton. I felt that Barack Obama was pretty hollow, even though he put on a good show. George W. Bush, and I think his relationship with the military-industrial complex, there's more than enough there that I don't even need to speak on it. Donald Trump is the antithesis, I feel, to a lot of what we're working towards. I think there's it sounds weird. There's a beauty and wisdom there, and being able to be an outsider who comes in and knows the political corruption so deeply and is able to speak to it, and able to speak to the anger and vitriol that a lot of Americans face because they felt very neglected and almost like dehumanized and mocked and ridiculed. Right? I think when Hillary Clinton was like, these people are deplorables, was insane, because I spent my teenage years in Arizona and in some of these environments. Like, there are large communities that are really, really left behind by our systems that aren't getting highlighted, and they don't know where to turn. I know the question was the presidents that I admire, but I definitely want to take a shift here because we just don't know where to turn within leadership right now. And we're not being given good options. There's real beauty in someone like Lincoln, who really did not come from a wealthy, advantaged family and was able to find his way to the top. These are some of the issues that I have with RFK Jr., where I know that he was in these systems, he was seeing the corruption, but I still felt this political dynasty element of him, even with everything that's happened with the Kennedys, that we just don't have average Americans representing average Americans anymore. And even someone like Barack Obama came up with an incredible amount of privilege that I just don't think is sometimes articulated correctly. Wasn't representing the communities that he was presenting himself to be representing effectively, because I don't think he really actually did understand them on a deep level. So that's where I see things right now.
Well, earlier in the episode, you mentioned the Healers program, which is what I was a part of for a while, but you've created something new called the WayShowers Collective. Tell the community on the podcast about what this is, what it's here to help people with, and just how they can join.
Yeah. So, I mean, for myself, when I went through my awakening, it was such an individualized process to me. It was such a big thing. I had to look within myself and reconcile a lot of my own shadow constructs, trauma, open up to figure out how these new states of consciousness, quote unquote, in a way, actually do integrate and become a part of me. But it was so localized to my individual experience. And I was also given these narratives around during that time that the world outside of me didn't really matter. It was all about my self-healing and my whatever. And that's true to a degree. We can sometimes be so outwardly focused, we lose touch and lose connection with ourselves when we're deeply guided back in. But there's a real psychology to I'm here to lead in the world, or I'm here to give my gifts, to give my wisdom, what does that look like? What does it look like for me to step away from corporate America, to look within, right, to be on this own individual journey, but then maybe to go back out in a consulting type position and to re-enter the corporate environment, but on my own terms, to shift those spaces to where they're more positively oriented, where they're more corporate social responsibility. What do I do with this? How do I navigate this? If I'm in the legal field and I had to leave big law because the hours were way too taxing, it was way too deep on my health, but I still want to serve as a lawyer, what does that look like in my position with my tools, my education, my awareness? How does that operate? How do I lead the community around me? How do I start up a healing business that is localized to the community and uplifting um, people immediate to me? Like, these are all questions we wrestled with, that I wrestled with, and I didn't feel like there was a lot of space there to explore these things. And so there's a lot of us who did not come here to sit quietly after our journeys. Like, we came here to really shift some things. But as we've talked about in this, that can't be done alone. And so the WayShowers is a safe space for us to explore the awakening process, but also explore with how it integrates into our purpose and how we want to show up in the world, and exploring various themes, right? We explore political polarization. There's a forum in there talking about JD Vance, positive, negative. Like, what do you think of Trump's VT? There are things about, like, what is it like to just to really live in self-care while you're wanting to step up in leadership and really still be participating in modernized Western society. These are things we need to come together on. And so I created a community where that could occur, and that passion, that fire that exists within you, that's not supposed to dole out from the awakening process. You're just supposed to learn how to direct it more intentionally. And we're giving a space where that cultivation can really occur.
Beautiful. Love. And I think that's going to be an incredible community and tool, especially in the topics that we've been talking about today, and how our society and our system is moving forward, and there being a yes, and yes, you can be spiritual, and there's a place for you outside of the spiritual world too, because it's clogged up a little bit. There's a lot of us, and I feel like we've all leaned into that to try to help us heal. But I mean, there's other opportunities to bring spirituality into other areas of life, not in that space all the time.
Yes, and I mean, I believe that there are old souls that aren't supposed to, quote unquote, spiritually awaken, and that's totally okay. And so there's an awareness and discernment with, like, how these states are even supposed to integrate with others. Like, we don't have to blast everyone over the head with, look at your sacral chakra. Like there's there's a way to let me get rid of the humor. There's a way to really ground the language, to ground the concepts, and we need to explore what that looks like. The language I'll use in the political sphere is going to be much different than the language I've used, like, hosting, like, ascension workshops, right? Like, it just is, and it's important. And so I think it's really important to understand these qualities, and it actually allows us to be more connected, in a sense.
I'll drop a link in the show notes for anyone who's interested in joining the community, and you guys can go check out Zack's Instagram too. And I strongly recommend following, because there's so much good conversation over there. Last but not least, you just started a podcast, right? Tell us a little bit about the podcast, because I love the name. I love the background on it. It's awesome.
It is a Jew and a Muslim walk into a podcast. I'll have to give my colleague Suze a shout out, because the name was initially her idea, in the sense of, I've been working with Muslim and Palestinian colleagues around what's going on in Palestine. Eventually, a good friend of mine, Dr. Bill Sadish, came to me. I said, hey man, wouldn't it be funny if, with everything going on, just a Jew and a Muslim just talked about their experiences in America and also current events. And we recently recorded our first episode, and I also believe it is a way of depolarizing. I understand why, but, like, this narrative that Jews and Muslims are so against one another and so diametrically opposed in their belief systems and the ways they operate, that has just not been my experience. It's so far from it. I have found more connectivity. I've found way more at home within these spaces sometimes than I ever did out in Missouri, right, in fundamental Catholic cultures, or as a Jewish man from that paradigm. So the ability to just kind of humanize ourselves, but also to provide space for us to discuss what's going on in the world from our lenses. We've only done one episode, but it's been a really cool experience so far. And this is something we've been exploring for almost a year now together, and we finally decided to pull the trigger on it.
Well, at one point you were going to do a reality show, right? What was that? You were going to do weren't you going to do like a reality show or a TV
I
show?
mean, yeah, that was over 3 years ago, I think. We were gonna no, and it was a talk with it was very preliminary things, but we wanted to move to Tulum, and I was gonna be a fake shaman and like just record because it was I was letting my humor and shadow go a little too off the rails right there. I think there could be some good stuff there if we had explored that, but I
You got a bigger purpose now.
just was not the right time and space to do that at all. And I think I don't know if the wigs are going to be coming out as much anymore, unfortunately. And it's been a beautiful stage, and I will always be very nostalgic of it. But as I chart this new trajectory, I don't know if the blue wigs and the characters have as much space. And we will all say our Charles Missy is amazing. I was recently on his Instagram page. He does this stuff way better than I ever could. If you haven't followed me and you like that, like he's got it right, like 10 times better than anything I could do. So yeah, go for him.
Those were good videos, I feel like. Yeah, so just so good, so good. I mean, just to watch your journey. I feel like I've been following you for like, what, 4 years now? Like 3 years, 3 or 4 years? And I feel like we, just being part of your community, we've been able to watch you like evolve and grow. And it's really cool to just watch how this next version of you is unfolding in one of the craziest times of our I think our modern history in our country. And I'm really excited to see the things that you do and the ideals that you bring to light, and I think also the way that you bring us all together, which is going to be cool.
There's one last point I want to make, and it's great that you bring this up. I feel like people benefit from hearing this. When I stepped into the spiritual wellness sphere, like a lot of the narratives that I received from my practitioners were like, this is the creme de la creme. Like, you're so fortunate to be here. And in a way I was. And I think for some people, like they're supposed to entrench themselves in the healing, in the holding, in the space holding. And that's as beautiful and needed experience as ever. But I was also being convinced that these other parts of me that kind of wanted to integrate into our institutional systems and structures or change them, these parts of me were wrong. Like, this is the narratives that I received a lot from the spiritual and the new age spaces. And I just want to emphasize how incorrect that is. If you feel fired to participate in our world in real raw ways, if the events of our world are really, sometimes leaving you depressed or upset. Like, yes, there's real wisdom in not absorbing problems of the world, but also like, thank you for being human. And this is just as much a part of the journey. All can coexist together. And so we need you, and be everything that you feel you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Own it and be authentic and raw.
Always.
Well, Zach, this conversation has been amazing. I feel like I learned so much, and I know that the community is also going to enjoy getting to know you. And I think it's hard not to be curious about the political world that is existing around us today. And I'm excited that they'll be able to see it through your eyes. So thank you so much for being on the Heal with Kat podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
He's on Instagram. He's on TikTok. Where else are you? Where else can people follow you?
That's it. No, that's it. I'm laying low right now. I probably will have to expand my online presence soon, which is good with what I want to do. But right now, I don't even post on TikTok. I don't like being on social media. I probably shouldn't say that, but
I don't either. I'm looking for a social media manager right now.
It's so annoying. I'm gonna have to do this more now with the political stuff. It's all about on my platform. So, anyways, Instagram is a great place to find me. It's for whatever reason, it's where I feel comfortable right now, sharing things.
I'll say this: he doesn't show up often, but when he does, you will not be disappointed.
Well, I'm not quiet when I decide to say something. It's not as frequent as the business coaches like it to be. But when I do, it's for a purpose.
I love it.
I won't bore you on there, that's for sure.
Absolutely fucking not. Nope, not at all. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. And guys, thanks for joining the Heal with Kat podcast this week. I'll see you next week.